President Donald Trump said Tuesday he will send federal intervention to Chicago and Baltimore, calling the cities a hellhole. According to Associated Press, the president was asked if he had decided to send National Guard troops to Chicago and said, "We're going in," but added, "I didn't say when." Trump said he'd like Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a Democrat, to call him and say, "Send in the troops." "If the governor of Illinois would call me up, would love to do it. Now, we're going to do it anyway. We have the right to do it," Trump said. He said he has an obligation to protect this country, and that includes Baltimore.
Mr. President, have you decided you're definitely going to send National Guard troops to Chicago?
I didn't say when, but the answer is, look, Chicago's very interesting because I watched Pritzker get up and say about, we don't need help, we're safe. But 2 weeks ago, they had 6 people murdered, and they had 24 people hit by bullets. Last week, as you know, it was 7 people, 24 people hit, and 7 people died. And then over the last 2 days, that was the crown jewel. They had, I guess, 9 or 10 killed, and 50 hit with bullets. And you have this governor get up, who's a terrible governor. Probably he and Gavin Newsom would be probably the 2 worst and most naive. They're naive. Either they're naive or they're very untruthful. And he'll say, we don't want any protection. We don't need. So in the last 3 weeks, he's lost almost 20 people killed. There's no place in the world, including you can go to Afghanistan, you can go to places that you would think of. They don't even come close to this. Chicago is a hellhole right now. Baltimore is a hellhole right now.
You made your mind up on Chicago, though?
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation. When we lose, when 20 people are killed over the last 2.5 weeks, and 75 are shot with bullets. So let me tell you a little story about a place called D.C., District of Columbia, right here where we are. It's now a safe zone. We have no crime. And I would love to have Governor Pritzker call me. I'd gain respect for him and say, we do have a problem, and we'd love you to send in the troops, because you know what? The people, they have to be protected. I saw today on one of your networks, not a friendly network, except really the opposite, I would say, very unfriendly network, and they interviewed about 12 people on this morning. Most of them were African-American, they were black, and they were saying, please, please, please let the president send in. These were people from Chicago. Please, we need help. We need help. We can't walk outside. We're petrified. If the governor of Illinois would call me up, I would love to do it. Now, we're going to do it anyway. We have the right to do it because I have an obligation to protect this country. And that includes Baltimore. And so I'm very proud of Washington. It serves as a template, and we're going to do it elsewhere. But Chicago is certainly going to be high. I would love to have him call. I would love the governor of Illinois. I'd be honored to take his call. All he has to do is say, sir, we need help. It's out of control. And everyone knows it is. He's not kidding anyone. I would love to have, I would say, Governor Moore call, because I watched him over the weekend trying to explain that Baltimore, what they need is housing. No, they don't need housing. They need to get rid of the criminals. These are hardcore criminals. You know, we took many people off the streets of Washington, D.C. They're hardcore. They're not going to be good. In 10 years, in 20 years, in 2 years, they're going to be criminals. They were born to be criminals, frankly. They were born to be criminals, and they're tough and mean, and they'll cut your throat, and they won't even think about it the next day. They won't even remember that they did it.
Russian generals continue to report to Kremlin dictator Vladimir Putin about non-existent victories in Ukraine. On Saturday, the chief of the general staff of the aggressor country, Valery Gerasimov, reporting on how much territory the occupiers managed to capture in the spring and summer, showed a map of the front that obviously does not correspond to the situation on the ground. This was noted by an analyst writing on the X platform under the nickname Demithridates. The Observer compared maps from the Ukrainian monitoring resource Deep State with the map that was demonstrated by Russian generals and came to the conclusion that the occupiers designate as captured not only the so-called grey zone, which neither side has control over, but also territories controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces where Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups have appeared at least once. For example, on the invaders' map, the southern outskirts of Pokrovsk, where a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group was liquidated in July, are designated as territories controlled by the Russian army. In addition, the occupiers took over control over the entire zone of their breakthrough near Dobropilya, despite the fact that Ukrainian defenders cut off part of this enemy penetration. In particular, on Saturday, the Dnieper Joint Forces Group reported that enemy units attempting to break through to Dobropilye were cut off and found themselves surrounded. U.S. Institute for the Study of War says that the Kremlin regularly exaggerates the scale of its military successes, thereby trying to create the impression of an inevitable victory over Ukraine, as well as to influence the position of the West. According to analysts, the Russian military leadership is deliberately spreading false information about the pace of the offensive. For example, the chief of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, claimed that since March 2025, 3,500 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory and 149 settlements have been captured. However, according to the ISW, the real figures are much lower, about 2,346 square kilometers and 130 settlements. Similar statements are made by Defense Minister Andrei Belousov. He claims that progress is being made by 600 to 700 kilometers square per month. However, according to experts, in 2025, this figure was a maximum of 440 to 500 kilometers square per month. ISW emphasizes that the Kremlin is hiding its heavy losses. At least 93,000 Russian servicemen were killed in 2024 alone, and more than 56,000 since the beginning of 2025. Despite mobile groups using quadricycles and motorcycles, the Russian army's advance has been creeping and lacks strategic continuity. Moscow is trying to convince the West that Ukraine is not capable of victory and to achieve a decline in support. But this is a false and dangerous illusion, the ISW report noted.